All right, so we're back at the cracks of postmodernity. Today we have Emmaleau Russo, whose novel Vivienne just came out this week, her first novel. Emily, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So this book, I have a review coming out shortly of it, but there's so many themes in here which are really thought-provoking, but also I just feel like are not explored enough in fiction and literature today. So just to start things off, I want to talk about the events, the experiences that kind of inspired this novel. Tell us a little bit what led up to it and how that kind of came to shape your thought process of writing this book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a few things. I guess, the book kind of moves between like rural-ish Pennsylvania, New York City, and like the art world, I guess, in New York, and or maybe some version of it, and the internet. So I think more than anything, what inspired the book was like maybe a particular like energy or vibe of this like sort of moving between worlds, like the world of the comment section and like the digital mania and the other world or this world maybe. So I was thinking very much about like that sort of momentum and like and how that works on us and our systems. And then I sort of found this character, Vivienne, the title character, who's like an older woman who's, I guess, I don't know, I guess you could say she's sort of canceled, right?
In a way,
In
yeah.
a way, canceled-ish online. Though she's not an online presence at all. She's a bit reclusive. I kind of found her in a book of poetry that I had written that was canceled.
Mhm.
Um, not really for the content of the poems, but rather just because I had kind of like associated with the wrong people or whatever, guilt by association. So that book of poetry was shut down, and I published it on my website, just sort of free to the public as a PDF. And uh, as I was, I don't know, kind of like maybe rereading it or posting it or something, I was focusing on there are some moments in it that deal with the surrealist artist Hans Belmer, who is like famous for his doll sculptures, disturbing doll sculptures and photographs, kind of like discombobulated figures. Um, and I talk about an old woman in there as well in the book of poems. And so I sort of like started to think of like imagine this older woman who was kind of maybe like not in the art world anymore, but had been a lover of this like famous controversial artist dude who's like long dead, and what her family might look like and what her life might be like. So she kind of like came to me through that other book, but I had not been canceled myself yet when Vivienne came to me. So it was kind of a weird synchronicity that I then got canceled. So maybe Vivienne caused it or something. I don't know.
It could be. It could
Could
be.
be.
Yeah, so before we talk about how the novel explores this experience of cancellation, I want to talk about why you decided to feature a surrealist artist. I mean, you just alluded to it before, but I don't know, like, what is it about surrealist art that interests you, and why was it worth including it and letting it make up a significant portion of this story?
Mhm. Um, that's a really good question. I mean, I think part of it is probably just instinct, like for whatever reason, I feel drawn to um surrealists, but specifically, I think probably like dissident surrealists or like like particularly fucked up surrealists, like people like George Bataille and Hans Belmer and Antonin Artaud. Kind of, there's like a madness about them, and their work is sort of very difficult to pin down or to fit into a box. Um, and also, maybe I don't know that I was consciously thinking about this, but like I'm very interested in like the surrealists' interest in psychoanalysis and dreams and the unconscious, and like dreams figure very heavily in this book, and the dream world and what's real and what's not real, and maybe like the internet being a space of surreality too.
Yeah. Are you I know you're saying you're a fan of like more dissident surrealists. Do you have any thoughts on like I guess the more famous like I'm thinking specifically of like the Spanish surrealists what was it, like I guess the 30s, like Dali and Buñuel and all them.
I don't have any like well formulated or particularly intelligent thoughts about them. I mean, I like a lot of their work. I like Buñuel especially. And I guess Dali is kind of like inescapable. Um, I mean, they're sort of I'm sort of I have like a kind of instinctual, I guess, attraction to them, but I don't feel as like kind of gutturally and viscerally interested in them as I do like Hans Bellmer or George Bataille or Artaud for some reason. Maybe because there's something a bit, to me, something a bit creepy about Bellmer and Bataille and Artaud. And I think I was trying to convey that energy a little bit in Vivienne, and kind of like the line between like sweetness and creepiness or youthful innocence and corruption and disturbia.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see how like the more mainstream surrealists have kind of been mellowed out, or they were mellowed out by their success. I don't know. But I mean, but okay, but on the topic of surrealism,
Mhm.
one of the kind of conflicts that I see arising in the story is this issue of whether like somebody's personal sins, we can say, somebody's errors are separate from their art, because you know the main conflict revolves around Vivienne being accused of kind of encouraging the suicide of her ex-lover's wife. And when the museum decides to remove her pieces from this exhibit, they cite that her art, like there's a kind of violent energy in her art that reflects the fact that she could have possibly, you know, made this woman want to end her life. And it's interesting because like this is kind of the consensus now. Like if someone is quote unquote problematic, their art is contaminated by their problematic behavior, and now we have to erase it all because it's going to trigger people and promote all kinds of problematic things. But then, you know, I also see this reaction with people saying, no, like art is amoral. A person's errors like shouldn't doesn't bring to bear upon their art because art is art for art's sake, whatever. And I feel like both of these kind of simplify the relationship between art and artists. And if you look at surrealism, yeah, like you said, a lot of it is like kind of creepy and weird and like, and yet I don't know, like we respect these artists as artists, even though yes, like perhaps they're portraying or even glorifying things that are concerning. Um, I don't know. Like I have a hard time saying like it's one we have to take one position or the other. I think we can say, yeah, like some art is problematic, and that has something to do with the fact that the person who made it had a lot of issues or did some weird things. That doesn't mean we shouldn't. That doesn't mean we should like expunge it from history, from museums. Like it means we should look at that. We should look at that complex, concerning story and try to understand. I don't know. That's my take, but I'm curious. Like if you could say a little bit more about how this conflict appears in the book and what you make of it yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that was well said. I mean, it is way more complicated than either of those stances. I agree. And yeah, I mean, I think the book sort of deals with it in a way that's maybe quite ambivalent. Like, I think it is dealing with Vivienne's sins, but also um, kind of, yeah, I mean, showing the way that like the kind of choir of internet voices like sort of piles onto her and starts to make these connections between her apparent like misdeeds and um her work. And I think some of them are like, I don't know, probably like hysterical and like but also they might be right. You know, some of them are kind of maybe making interesting points. I don't know. So I think the book maybe is dealing with it in an ambivalent way, but also I think the book is focused on like questions about guilt and innocence and like the fact that maybe, and I think this is where I drew on like my own experience a little bit, because when I was whatever, you know, when my book was canceled or removed from that press, I think I did a kind of like moral invent. I was like, wait a minute, am I a shitty person, and am I should I apologize to someone? And if so, who, you know? And I think that was actually like the most interesting part of the experience for me, like kind of doing that and figuring out what I really thought about it, as opposed, like, obviously the instinct is just to be like, you assholes, you're, you know, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe not. Maybe I guess some other people's instinct might be to like apologize or denounce the figures that they're being asked to denounce or whatever. But I chose kind of neither of those paths. And I was like, oh, wait, maybe I am bad, but and I, like most people, have done a lot of really bad things, but not this. I don't think this was one of them. So I think that, you know, and Vivienne kind of goes through a similar thing in one of the scenes in the book. So I guess it's like a really long parabolic way of answering kind of your question.
Yeah, and this is, I don't know. I just find this a very interesting position to take because it's too easy to go to one extreme or the other, to be like, okay, this person is problematic. We got to get rid of them. And there are, or like, no, no, it's the cancel culture. We have to cancel culture. No, like people are problematic. This is human nature. We do dumb things. We hurt people. And we should be able to like be called out for our mistakes. I mean, in your case, in the guilt by association, I don't know if we can call that like a real mistake, but no, like I think there's, yeah, there's merit in that, but then allowing a person to be like, yeah, I screwed up, I learn, I grow from it, not in this kind of performative way that we become accustomed to, these like very public apologies, but still, the fact that you even ask the question, like, yeah, did I do something messed up? Do I have to, change something? That's reflected um, in the main character in the novel, like when there's this scene that I told you that I like wrote a lot about in the review, of when she's in a church and about to go to confession. And she really like has done this kind of moral self-examination, like asking, am I in some way responsible? How do I distinguish between the voices of this kind of damning public and the voice of my conscience, even of God? I rarely see anybody talk about being canceled. No, I would forget being canceled. Like talk about making mistakes in such a kind of raw, honest way that it looks at like the multiple factors in play, which I found to be extremely refreshing. But I don't know, it's interesting that like another one of like the conflicts in the book is how Vivienne is, yeah, she's this very quirky private character, kind of mystical in a sense, and her daughter is a little more put together, a little bit more, I don't know, I don't want to say normie, but like she's very skeptical about her mother's kind of like mystical artsy musings. And this kind of conflict between like the kind of automated, like very smooth, clean ideal versus like the messy, earthy, spiritual one, shows up at various points in the novel. So yeah, I mean, can you say a little bit more about why you featured this and like what you hope it kind of got across to readers?
Um, Wait, why I featured what, like, which part specifically?
I'm saying like this tension between like, again, like the kind of smooth,
Oh.
automated, normal ideal versus kind of Vivienne's like earthy kind of messiness.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting that I totally agree there's like this thing in the book about smoothness and automation and versus, or like in conversation with rough, earthy, grotesque stuff. But it's interesting that you're sort of equating Vivienne with like the more earthy, and
okay.
maybe are you saying kind of like Valor, her daughter, is a little more like smooth?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I
interesting.
perceive, but maybe I
That's
missed.
cool.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's like, I think, well, I mean, yeah, as I said, I'm really interested in this, like, or not even interested. I don't even know if that's the right way to put it. Like, we're just all bombarded with like smooth, automated screens constantly, and um, whatever's outside of the screen or out of frame. So I was thinking about how to kind of deliver that like jumping between worlds in writing and like in a novel form. Um, and everyone's like smoking constantly. It's like, I
Yes.
think the book is just like a cloud of smoke, basically. So I think
Yeah. No, it is. It is. Within a literal and a kind of like aesthetic sense. Yeah.
mm, mm, aesthetic cloud of smoke. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I think partly I was thinking maybe of like this very atmospheric, vibey, um, kind of writing I think that happens in the book, maybe when I'm describing dreams or like particularly dreamy moments, even in waking life. I think I was thinking about the smoke as a way to, I don't know, create this weird um like screen, another kind of screen, you know. Um,
Interesting.
and also uh I guess I think there's one moment where there's like vaping is mentioned and talked about. So I think I was sort of thinking about the difference between like vaping and smoking the real shit and how that might play out in like someone's personality um or energy. But yeah, Valor is totally like skeptical of a lot of her mom's stuff. And I think there's a lot of weird ambivalent mother-daughter stuff, obviously, throughout the novel and father-daughter stuff and grandma. I don't know. Yeah, basically it's like a family shit show, smoke show.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I like these kind of arguments about smoking that come up, like when she offers Vesta, or she allows her to take a couple puffs, and then
Yeah.
Valor is like kind of freaked out by this. And
Yeah,
I
must be
love,
7.
yeah, yeah, and you can only imagine what would happen if family services heard about a 7-year-old. No, but then there's the part where I forget what prompted it, but Vivienne says like at least Vesta's not an automaton. That like was it? It was earlier on in the book, but like I think basically saying that she was doing something that was kind of like weird or not, like I don't know, but she was saying like it's good that your daughter has an actual personality and takes risks and it's not just kind of like a little robot.
Hmm.
I don't know. That was it was kind of a loaded comment because like
Mm.
I don't think that's on parents' radars very much anymore. That like you want to raise them to truly be original, to be I don't know, to be messy humans who like actually end up, yeah, who end up having like a real personality and who have character. Like now it's, yeah, like we want kids to be successful. We want them to avoid dangerous situations, but then at what cost? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big theme. That's true. I had kind of forgotten about that, but there are a lot of moments where like Vivian kind of lets Vesta, her granddaughter, do something kind of quote unquote dangerous or just like, or like watch, I think at one point she's watching a Bergman movie
Yes. Yeah.
and the Lord does not approve. And also I think, the word automaton, I think that's in there a few times in different ways. Like
Yeah.
I was thinking obviously about like the automata of the internet and like the smooth, I don't know, personalitylessness, that word, that can happen maybe, or like the sort of like smoothing out of everything, leveling out. But I was also thinking about like this obsession that the surrealists had with automata and
Mm,
like the interesting movements that come from automatic writing or automatic
mm,
movement or the ways that the body can behave when we are not um, conscious of how it's moving. So I was thinking about that aspect of it too, and like the potential, I don't know, like generative intrigue that could come from automata or automatic movement, even like Vesta grinding her teeth when in her sleep, things like that.
mm. Yeah, and I again like this issue of like kids not like becoming automaton, not having personalities. Like you see how this has consequences for the art world, for literature, that if people don't have like real character, don't have real personalities, then like you get what's on the New York Times bestseller list. Like you have people I mean that's what it is. They're following this
Yeah, yeah.
formula
Mhm.
that, I don't know, like they're I've read some of these books and it's just like why do we praise these people who have nothing original to say, but also like their writing style is kind of shitty, but they're saying the right things, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah.
Um, like,
Yeah.
yeah, the fact that we praise this kind of automatic formulaic style, even though it has no real substance. Um, this is this smooth ideal, this I don't know, but I think there's something to be said though, like about this fear of taking risks, this fear of like really engaging with the messy parts of humanity that that Freud wrote about, that the surrealists try to depict in their art. I think we've lost. I don't know. I mean, why do you think that like there's this fear of taking that risk of really engaging with the messiness of human nature? why do you revert to this kind of like automated kind of ideal?
Um, Probably something to do with death.
Hmm.
I mean, I think we're quite frightened, obviously always of death, but there's also maybe more so now with like all of these technologies to, I don't know, prolong life and avoid suffering, and maybe we have a kind of like increased distrust of suffering, any kind of suffering or anything that's hard, or anything that's like triggering or like asks us to like think in a different way, is like seen as a threat or like something to maybe disengage with or just kind of ignore as opposed to go towards. I don't know why that is. Maybe something to do with the algorithm.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, I mean, I wonder about that too. I mean, I think there is maybe just this human nature thing of shutting out what feels foreign or frightening.
Yeah, this is that death is nothing new. Like it's always been here, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I do have this sense like we've lost certain tools to confront it and then like build something with that fear, like to create
Yeah.
art, to create great literature. Um, but I mean, but that also, I mean, kind of ties into the fact that like various forms of spirituality find their way into this story. And I think maybe that's one of the factors why that like, we've collectively lost a sense of the spiritual, the religious, which used to be a kind of one of those tools to make sense of death and to inspire good art. Um, Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about like these various kind of spiritual themes, concepts that appear in the book and why you wanted to include them.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, can I ask you a question in response?
Yes.
What do you, like what how did you find its relationship with like spirituality or religion or other worlds or the spirit realms, like, and in what parts like were you kind of most met with it?
Hmm. I found that it contributed to this kind of smoky aesthetic, like
Hmm.
made you feel like you were entering into this other realm. And it seemed like, again, there is this kind of juxtaposition that I perceive between this kind of like messy, earthy versus like the smooth, automated. Because, like Vivian's kind of thrown herself into this, I don't know, into her spirituality. And it looks like the lore is